24 years later, that same boy would break Pelé's record for World Cup goals, and just days after that, he'd lead his national team into the quarterfinals as captain. This isn't a screenwriter's invention. This is the real biography of a man now being called the biggest star of the 2026 World Cup. And the craziest part of this story is the moment he nearly ended his career before it even really began. Let me tell you everything in order. Look, football has dozens of stories about rejected talents. Messi, nearly cut for his height. Modric, called too fragile. It's practically a cliché by now. But the story we're telling today is different in one way. This man is playing at the World Cup right now, in July 2026, and rewriting the tournament's record books in front of the entire world. I'll break this story into 5 parts. Let's start with the most humiliating moment of his childhood, that very rejection. Then we'll move through the years when he was just an average player, not a star. Next, the moment that made him England's captain in 2018 at just 24 years old. And finally, what's happening right now at this tournament, and why the numbers he's putting up shouldn't physically be possible. And yes, part 4, about his move to a German club, will explain why that step became the key to everything that happened afterward. So, picture a London suburb, the academy of one of England's most prestigious clubs, Arsenal. An 8-year-old boy, ordinary looking, physically no different from the other kids. Slow, not the most technical, a bit chubby by youth football standards. The coaching staff makes a decision: release him. The reason given to the parents goes something like this: the boy is too small and not fast enough for professional football. Picture that for a second. A club with one of the best academies in the world looks at a future England captain and sees nothing special at all. Zero potential. A complete, final rejection. And here's an important point people often forget. After this rejection, the boy doesn't instantly turn into a superstar. There's no "and then he proved everyone wrong" moment. What follows is a long, boring, completely unromantic road through England's lower divisions, 3 loan spells at different clubs, and years when nobody talked about him as a future star. But before we get to that period, you need to understand what was going through his head at that moment, because his reaction to this rejection would define his entire career. After Arsenal, the boy joins Tottenham's academy, a club that, at the time, was far from England's elite. No immediate breakthrough happens. The club sends him out on loan 3 times to gain playing experience. First to one club, then another, then a third. This is standard practice for players a club isn't fully sure about. Not for future superstars, for solid, average players who need to prove they can even play at a professional level. And here's the key detail that explains everything that happens next. While other talented players his age were already shining in top clubs' first teams, he spent these years literally rebuilding himself physically. He worked on his speed, on his shooting technique, on his off-the-ball positioning, the very skill that, more than a decade later, would become his greatest weapon. He makes his first team debut for Tottenham, gradually becomes a regular starter, starts scoring. Not explosively, not like a prodigy, but steadily, season after season. And it's this consistency, not raw talent, that catches the attention of the England national team's coaching staff. In 2015, he makes his international debut. And now comes the moment I actually asked you to stick around for, because what follows next is what turns an ordinary, solid forward into the captain of a nation. 2018, England is preparing for the World Cup in Russia, and the coaching staff makes a decision that seemed risky at the time. Hand the captain's armband to a 24-year-old forward with no major international trophies to his name. This is the same guy who, 6.5 years earlier, was written off as having no future. And here's what happens at the tournament. In the very first match, just 11 minutes in, the new captain scores his first World Cup goal. Then, goal after goal. A hat trick against Panama, with a penalty and rebounds, becomes England's biggest ever win at a World Cup. By the end of the tournament, he has 6 goals, the Golden Boot as top scorer, and a World Cup semi-final, England's first in 28 years. The boy who was released from the academy for being too small becomes the World Cup's Golden Boot winner. But the story doesn't end there. And the next few years turn out to be far more painful than his childhood rejection. Because next comes a tournament where he gets closer than ever to the biggest trophy of his career and loses it in the most dramatic way imaginable. I'll skip the details of the Euro finals and semifinals. That's a topic for another video. Let's focus instead on another decision that turns out to be key to what's happening with this player right now. In 2023, at the peak of his career as his English club's all-time leading scorer, he makes a decision many fans saw as a step backward. He moves to Germany, to a Munich club. The skeptics' logic was understandable. Why change your familiar league, your familiar style of play, your familiar surroundings at 30, an age when most forwards are already starting to slow down? The answer comes in his very first season. He doesn't just adapt, he starts tearing up the German league in statistically impossible ways. One of the most productive seasons in the history of the German league. Top scorer titles in multiple competitions in a row. And in the season before the 2026 World Cup, he reaches an entirely new level. 61 goals for his club in a single season. a domestic treble win in Germany, and the top scorer award among Europe's elite leagues. Which means at 32 years old, an age when most forwards of his caliber are already past their peak and declining, he enters the 2026 World Cup in the best form of his career. And this is where it gets really interesting, because what he's doing at this tournament right now, statistically, shouldn't be possible for a 32-year-old forward. So, the 2026 World Cup, hosted across the USA, Mexico, and Canada, our hero, England's captain, scores twice in the opening group match against Croatia, bringing his personal World Cup goal tally to 10. Next, a goal against Paraguay. He becomes England's all-time leading World Cup scorer, overtaking a legend from the 1980s. The group stage is over. England wins their group. Up next, a knockout round match against the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's where the tournament's tensest moment happens. The team falls behind as early as the 7th minute. The whole match is a struggle, full of mistakes, with the team's advancement literally hanging by a thread. And at that critical moment, in the 75th minute, it's the captain who equalizes. With that goal, he draws level with Pelé himself in World Cup goals. Then he scores the winning goal, sending the team through to the next round. Next, a move to the legendary Estadio Azteca in Mexico City, a match against the tournament's hosts, Mexico. The England team becomes the first in history to beat Mexico at that stadium in a World Cup match. The captain converts a penalty, bringing his tournament tally to 6 goals and tying the legendary German forward Gerd Müller's all-time World Cup goal total. As I'm writing this script, England is preparing for a quarterfinal match against Norway, where, on the other side of the pitch, stands another contender for the tournament's top scorer award. See the paradox here? This man is 32 years old. By all classic football standards, this should be a period of slowly fading speed and sharpness. Instead, he's delivering the best tournament of his career at his 4th World Cup, even though he still hasn't won a single major international trophy in his entire career. And here's what struck me most about this story while I was gathering the facts for this video. It's not that Arsenal was wrong to release an 8-year-old boy. Youth academies get it wrong all the time. It's something else. What happens to a person after a rejection like that? This player never had an explosive, cinematic moment of revenge. There was just years of methodical, completely unromantic work. Years of loans at modest clubs. Years of physically rebuilding himself. Years when almost nobody talked about him. And it's precisely this quiet, seemingly boring work that became the foundation allowing him, at 32, to rewrite World Cup history. Maybe that's the real lesson of this story. Not that every scout eventually gets it wrong, but that how you respond to rejection matters more than the rejection itself. If this story caught your attention, subscribe. There's more real football stories like this coming. And let me know in the comments, do you think England will finally get their hands on a major trophy this year? Or will they hit the quarterfinal, semi-final wall again like before? See you in the next video.